Hey garden friends, welcome back. We are in the garden, and today we are going to talk the 10 top mistakes beginner gardeners make and what you could do to maybe fix them. At the end, we're going to have a bonus tip or mistake that is often is caused by many garden vloggers or even bloggers, and I'll tell you what that is, so make sure you stick around for that. Alrighty, let's get right into it. I brought my notes so I didn't get too distracted and off point, but we want to discover or talk about the 10 top mistakes. And I'll start at number 10 and we'll go backwards. So how's that? Let me get my glasses on and read. So the top, or the 10, number 10 is giving up too soon. A lot of times when you're just starting out, you will have a lot of fails. And you know what? Even though I've gardened for over 40 plus years, I have fails still that occur. And I just learn from them instead of quitting. I try to figure out what happened. You know, seasons, every season will have its ups and downs. What worked for me 2 years ago hasn't worked for me the last 2 years. And I'll point out is that is what did not work for me this last 2 years was growing cosmos from seed, direct sown. They would come up. I don't know if bugs ate them. I don't know why they failed. I usually grow cosmos very easily every single year. And the last couple of years, they just haven't performed or done anything. Now next year, I'll do something different and I'll share that in a totally different video. The sun's coming through the trees and getting in my eyes. Number 9. Not pruning correctly. When you have plants, let's take hydrangea macrophylla for instance. They bloom on old wood, or many of them do. I do have some reblooming ones, so maybe that wasn't a good choice, but there are things that bloom on old wood. And if you were to prune them at the wrong time, then you would lose all your blooms. The same with lilacs. Lilacs is another one. So knowing the pruning requirements of plants is important, as well as knowing when is the best time to prune. Sometimes general advice isn't always accurate for your area. So I always recommend finding someone local who has that plant, or a local nursery or garden center that has educated employees or people that know what they're doing in the garden. Not every garden center has people working there that know anything about gardening or have gardened in the local area. So you got to pick and choose. Find out someone who knows a lot about gardening. And then also I would say search on the internet. Be careful. There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of information put out by, I just was watching a video and you could tell it was a AI generated voice. You had to catch it. It sounded normal, but it would mispronounce plant names that were very obvious. Now, you know, there are things that we all mispronounce, but these were like, viburnum, and she would say something like viburnum. And I'm like, that's AI generated. They're just reading it and trying to phonetically say it. And anyways, and a lot of the advice there, though it sounded good, I knew wouldn't work. So you have to be careful even then. So pruning properly. And sometimes that takes trial and error, and I really wish it didn't. But again, that leads to 10, whereas don't give up too quick. Just live and learn. Now on my channel with number 9, pruning properly, I do have different blog posts on my blog and some on my video YouTube channel on pruning different things like lilacs, roses. I don't know. I don't think I have one on hydrangeas yet. But that pruning is really different than deadheading, though you could consider deadheading a form of pruning. But I also have deadheading blog posts and videos available for different flowers, so you can kind of get an idea of how it could be done. Number 8, ignoring pests and diseases. Now this for a beginner gardener can be tough because you won't always recognize the signs and symptoms of maybe a pest attack. And even someone like me who's gardened for 40 plus years, I just figured out I have a Japanese maple and some lamium in an area, and I thought, because of the way it looked, that it wasn't getting enough water. And when I got in there closer to try and fix the irrigation, I recognized that it was spider mites that was causing the problem and not a lack of water. And it's so far gone, I don't know, or they've done so much damage, I do not know if I can salvage that Japanese maple. But I'm gonna hope for the best. I've treated it now. I have made sure the irrigation is good. But yeah, make sure you catch it ahead of time and treat for it as best as you can. Now, I am all for insecticides. Organic methods, I avoid insecticides because they can cause problems with beneficial insects. And there are so many alternatives to using those. So yeah, just try to get a heads up. And if you need help, you can take a piece of leaf or something, or very good pictures or set of pictures to your local extension office, and they can identify the problem for you. And hopefully they'll give you an organic solution. I had to move, the sun was getting in my eyes. So choosing the wrong plants, number 7, choosing the wrong plants. Now, it's easy to fall in love with plants that won't make it in your environment, your soil, your zone, and you're doomed to failure and disappointment if you plant those plants. So how to get around that? Well, you research. Research the plants that you're wanting, that you're ordering. Make sure that it will thrive in your area. Now, it's more than just your low temperatures. You want to know if you have high humidity, is that plant going to succumb to mildew? Or your highs, is a plant not really liking what the area that you're going to plant it? Maybe it's full sun, and in your high temperatures it needs more shade. So do a little deep dive research. For me, the big nurseries that I can get plants from, they're in another zone, meaning they carry plants that would not live here. And if I was just to go shopping and buy plants because they're my local nursery, then it could pose a problem. So I always do research on plants. I should say always. I just made a big mistake. I had read somewhere that lantana did really well and did great and was hardy in my zone. That was wrong. I went plant shopping. I picked up the lantana I wanted, and I got it home. I was in a hurry. Got it home, and right on the label, it said the lowest temperature it will survive in is 32 degrees, and we get much colder many times in the winter. So I'm like, how did I do that? But I did research on how I can overwinter it, maybe in a dormant state in my basement or something. But yes, pay attention to things like that. Don't plant plants that aren't very hardy in your area. And what I mean by hardy is not just they will survive, I mean they will thrive. This is another time that having a garden friend or somebody local who knows what grows well in the area is helpful. Another one, let me see, number six, not utilizing mulch to your benefit. Now, I have a blog post on 15 plus type mulches for your garden. So there's a wide array of mulch types, but there's so much benefit to using mulch. And number one, it helps, builds your soil. It helps retain moisture. It helps to block weeds. There's just so much benefit that it really is something that you need to put on your radar as far as being very, very important for your garden. And learning how to mulch is important too, because yeah, you don't want to get it too close to the base of plants because then it can cause problems in of itself. So be aware of that. Number 5, overcrowding plants. Now, I admit that I do this plenty of times. When I'm first planting a garden area, I will put some, this is really for shrubs and perennials more than annuals, because annuals die out each year. But many times I'll plant them closer together right at the beginning because they're going to be small. It's going to take, oh, that's the most beautiful little finch. I wish I could have showed you that. Anyways, back to planting too closely. I will plant them together closely because at first they're going to be very small, like the first year. And then the second year, with perennials, a lot of times the saying is first year sleep, second year creep, third year leap, meaning they really take off the third year. So many times I will plant a little bit closer together than is recommended, but I will make sure and divide them out before they become overcrowded, and that may be in the third year. So just be aware of that. Don't overcrowd your plants. In areas that are humid and get a lot of rain, it can promote fungus or not have enough air circulation. I live in a very arid climate in the summer, and I don't have those issues as much as others, but it is something to consider. And maybe once you get a few years of gardening under your belt, you will feel more comfortable or have a little more garden savvy to be able to plant closer together and have them do fine. Problem number 4 is ignoring your soil quality or not understanding how important it is. I had a garden friend, and she started a new garden in an area that had been devoid of anything before. And she mulched a section very deeply with wood chips last year. And then this year, she decided to plant in that area with the wood chips and a neighboring area that didn't get the wood chips. And she didn't think it, she just wanted to plant this area. And the difference between how well the plants grew that had been heavily amended, or the wood chips had broken down a bit in the soil, and it had enriched the soil in that area, as opposed to the area that hadn't had any and was just bare. The growth difference in her, they were annuals, planted from seed, was dramatic. And so it shows you the importance of soil health and what type. You can have your soil tested at your local extension office or at an extension office. There's links online of places, or you can just choose to amend right from the beginning. That's where compost comes in. You can do raised beds. I have a blog post on raised bed gardening. Through my videos, I have shared the metal raised beds I have used. And that way you fill it with soil that's good, and you know it's good. But if you want to just do your own soil that's in the ground, that's perfectly fine. Just know that you should amend it from the beginning. And you can use things to help with, like through the winter, to help amend it for you is cover crops. I love buckwheat. It's a beautiful cover crop. There's other cover crops that really help. One thing about soil is it doesn't like to be naked. So it's going to fill in with weeds or what have you if you don't cover it with a heavy mulch, if you don't put down a cover crop, something's going to try to fill in that soil, and that's just nature's way. And there's a very interesting, what would I say? I should do a video on it about what weeds that grow in a certain area tell you, because they are trying to tell you something about your soil. So that's a whole interesting topic unto itself. But make sure that you enrich your soil, have it tested, know where you're going. Don't always fall for, there's a lot of, I call phony baloney garden advice out there. And that sounds pretty harsh, but it's so accurate, because there's so many things that people love using kitchen ingredients in their soil. I think it's fine. And the number one I'm thinking of is Epsom salt. And Epsom salt is just basically a magnesium. And why I bring that up, sorry, butterfly coming, was I get a lot of a certain weed, no matter what. And that weed is telling me that I have magnesium-rich soil. If I was to add more magnesium in the form of Epsom salt, whether I'm fertilizing roses or whatever, I would be creating more of a problem, because magnesium and calcium, they kind of battle or balance each other out. If one is too high, it blocks the absorption of the other. So I'll go with tomatoes, blossom end rot. That is because there's a lack of calcium being able to go up into the plant, not that there's a lack of calcium in the soil. So you can see a high magnesium soil can inhibit a plant from taking up the calcium it needs. So that's what I mean about knowing your soil and not adding amendments willy-nilly unless you know what your soil needs. So a good generic amendment to help your soil would be compost. And that is basically a slow release fertilizer, but it also can help break up clay soils. Another one is leaves. If you can chop up leaves and let them deteriorate, a lot of times I use whole leaves. I know everybody says to chop them up, but I have used where I've just piled up whole leaves to 5-6 inches thick, let them overwinter in a spot that I wanted just mulched. They did beautifully. The water got through fine. I've read one of the things where it said not to use whole leaves without chopping them up was because they would block water absorption into the soil. Really? Do you think that's true? Do you think we'd be using them as roofing material if that was true, because it would keep water out of our homes? No. Water gets through. The worms eat them. If you're afraid of them matting and not letting water through, you can go out and fluff them up every now and then through the months of winter. But I've never had that issue. And then come spring, when I'm ready to plant, what's left is just crumbly, loose. I rake away where I want to seed something or plant something, and it's beautiful and weed-free area. So there you have it. Know your soil. Number 3, over or under watering. Yep, that people can overlove their plants and or not give them enough. Now where we live, a drip irrigation system works tremendously. And I should do a video on how to set up a rinky-dinky homemade, not homemade, but I just have a kit that I had bought originally from Home Depot. It had everything in it that I needed for a small area. I put it together, and then that taught me the components, what I needed, and all of that. Now, most plants you will find that has watering recommendations for them when you buy certain plants or order them. Now, know that when you first buy plants, you will need to keep them well watered until they're established. Now, a lot of plants, once they've developed a deep root system, are more drought tolerant, and you can ease up on the watering. Then there's also like more drought tolerant plants that don't need as much water as some moisture loving plants. Now here I don't have a lot of bog loving plants. I bought some that could tolerate drier conditions. So just be aware of that when you're buying a plant, of what the water requirements are, what kind of conditions you have. You may live in a same zone as me, I'm an 8B, but you may get more rain or a lot of rain in the summer. I know people in fellow gardeners that in the Midwest or like the East Coast, and they get summer rains. They don't even have a drip irrigation system because they get an inch a week or somewhere around there, and you'll hear them complaining if they're not getting any rain because they had to go out and water. Well, for me, I have to water every week in summer because we don't get any summer rains. So knowing your conditions as well as the plant's needs is important so that you don't over or under water anything. We're almost there. We're almost done. Stick around for the very end one because it is really one that I have found to be across the boards a problem for beginner gardeners and even some veteran gardeners. So there you have it. Okay, number 2, planting in the wrong location. Plants have certain sun requirements. Some need shade, and that can change with your temperatures. So I'll give you an example. Again, being up in the Northwest this a couple weeks ago, we were in an area in Seattle, which the zone is very close to mine. But I noticed that in planters throughout the city, that they had both shade-loving and sun-loving plants. And the containers were planted in full sun. But Seattle's full sun and my full sun, or the full sun in your area, may be different. Meaning they get a lot of cloud cover. The temperatures are usually cooler, even if it's sunnier. How they had the planters planted, where the shade-loving plants were kind of protected underneath a larger plant in that container. In your gardens, you can do the same thing. You can plant plants that love the sun in a full sun-loving area, and then plant shades that might need dappled shades, plants that may need dappled shade or a little bit more shade during the hot part of the day. And so knowing those little ins and outs can help you, but you have to be observant. And again, that's where that sun mapping comes in, where you map through the season. And remember, through the summer, the sun location changes. And I'll tell you an example here. I am surrounded by tall evergreen trees. Midsummer, or at summer solstice, the sun is direct overhead. I don't get my garden does not get shaded very much during that time of year. It gets a lot of hours of sun. Right now, we are beginning September, we're heading into fall, that the trees along the south side are very tall, and the sun is lower in the sky. So I don't get nearly the amount of sun that I do in June. And it causes my plants to stretch taller and start to lean. But that's what I mean about sun mapping and knowing through the season where the sun hits and what plants will thrive. Now, my plants all thrive that I have for full sun for the most part, but they do elongate. They get much taller than what they're supposed to, or what they are, I should say, marketed as. Like I have a verbena that I grew. It's supposed to be shorter, supposed to be under 3 feet, and Verbena bonariensis, and it gets 4 feet tall. And if you're wanting a shorter plant, you might think, why is this plant getting so tall? I know why. It's because of the shade cast by the evergreen trees around me. Now, in the future, there's a few trees on that side where the sun comes that are supposed to be taken down. When that happens, it will dramatically change the conditions in my garden. For me, for the better, because I'll get sun sooner in the spring and it will stay longer in the fall. So that is something that will be wonderful when that happens. So know your plant's requirements for sun and shade, etc. Okay, we're down to number 1. This isn't the bonus. This is the number 1 mistake new gardeners make. And I will say, even though I am not a new gardener, I do this. Starting too big. I wouldn't say I've started too big. I have a tendency to start more gardens or put in more, or areas that I haven't curated or made a garden, I just left them wild. I'm starting to garden. And so I've added more to my workload. But I love it. I love starting gardens. But for you, for new gardeners, starting small and getting a foothold on all the knowledge you need to be successful easily. Now I add the easily, because you could be successful, but you would learn from trial and error. you want to know, like I said, you want to know where your sun is. If you start in a small area, the expenditure of time and money is limited. And then you can learn as you build your garden. And you can notice if a plant is struggling where it's at, you can dig it up and move it. But start with the size that you can manage with your time constraints and your budget. And then you won't get frustrated. You won't do number 10, which is give up too soon. You will learn how you can enjoy your garden space, and not make it too much work for you where it becomes a chore rather than a joy. So that's number 1 mistake. And it's easy. I know it is so easy to make. So let's get to the bonus. Now, this is a problem, I think, my opinion, I think because it is promoted across many garden YouTube channels. People will say you need to know your garden zone. I do not disagree with that, but they don't always tell you how to find out properly from the USDA garden zone map how to find your garden zone. If I was to go in, they tell you just to put in your zip code. That doesn't work for me, and I have a video, and I will link it, on how you can find what is listed as your garden zone. Mine, if I put in my zip code, it comes up with 6B. I am not 6B, I am 8B. And I found how the map is interactive and how you can find your zone. It's like honed in on your area. But the other thing I want to say is too many people think that the garden zone also tells you what you can plant and when. That's not true. The USDA zone map only tells you the low temperatures, your average low temperatures in your area, and what plants, you'll learn what plants will survive through that. So a plant will have zones listed on the label or when you order it in whatever section it has. And I'll tell you, yes, this plant will thrive in zone 8B. But it doesn't say how much sun it needs. I mean, the zone doesn't tell you how much sun that plant needs. Your zone doesn't tell you when your last and first frost date is, which is important. It doesn't tell you your climate conditions. It tells which is how much rain you get, how long of a winter you get. It doesn't tell you when you can plant out tender annuals, because that changes with your last and first frost date. So there is too much emphasis put on the USDA garden zones as far as to how much it helps you. It only tells you your lowest average winter temperatures. Therefore, you would always buy plants that are above that. Now, if you want to buy a plant that wants to grow in a bog and you have arid conditions, meaning dry, your zone, does that matter? No, because it has to do with how much rain you get, and your zone doesn't tell you that. So that, my friends, is your bonus tip that I preach here all the time, and only because I keep seeing, I don't want to call it misinformation, but I want to say incomplete information about the USDA garden zones. Now, I often get a question because I don't put up in my title and I don't say it right out of the bat of my videos of what garden zone I'm in. And that's because I want to encourage people to get away from relying much too much on the garden zones and what they actually mean. I want them to know what they actually mean and not what people have purported them to be. It's because some people will put up on a new beginner gardener video, the number one thing you need to know is your garden zone. It's not the number one thing you need to know. It's just one of the things you should know, and it's just one piece of a lot of information that will help you to be a successful gardener through the years. So I did this video so you could avoid those mistakes, maybe have a little bit more success rather than the trial and error right out of the gate. And, you know, I do have a lot of videos here on my YouTube channel, as well as I have blog posts on many types of plants, their care requirements, if I would recommend them or not. And know that that is for my area and my conditions. Reach out locally. That is your best bet as far as what will and will not work for you. I know I used to garden in the San Joaquin Valley, and that's a zone 9B. And let me tell you, how things grew was completely different. I also had more sun. I wasn't shaded during certain parts of the year from tall trees. And I just learned what wouldn't work here that worked beautifully there. And it's not that big of a zone leap. And my cousin, who lives at the base of this mountain, is also a 9B. I think it's a 9B. And her conditions are different than the San Joaquin Valley. And she has to adapt because of those conditions. The zone is the same. So I just always be observant. If one plant fails to thrive for you, number one, you can move it. Number two, if it totally fails, there's a plant that will replace it that probably would thrive. I'll give you an example. Hybrid tea roses. I love all roses, and I had lots of hybrid teas when I gardened in the San Joaquin Valley, and I could stick one in the ground and ignore it, and it would just thrive. The conditions down there were wonderful. I didn't have to do hardly anything, and everything grew like weeds. But here I have to have a little more effort and work to get things to thrive. I learned the hybrid teas just don't do well for me. I stopped planting them. There are other rose varieties that will do just fine here, and they're just as beautiful. So remember to swap out plants if one doesn't work. And just know that there's all kinds of beautiful plants that you can grow. Can you hear the hummingbird? And not feel deprived when those certain ones don't thrive for you. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Come on back for the next one, where I'll try to have more helpful hints. And I am going to come back with a video sharing a little bit more about my trip to Butchart Gardens in Victoria, BC. It was a wonderful trip, and it helped me to get past, I was kind of stumped with some things around here, and it helped me to zone in on what was wrong and what I need to do to change it. So come on, boys, stick around for that. I don't know exactly when I'll get that done, but I will. All right, I'll see you all later. Bye. And what you need to know, oh darn it, no, this isn't gonna work. One moment, my microphone's flipping out. What if I did this? Yeah. See if it'll go through 2 layers. No, that's not right. Sorry, come on, we can do this. Hey, Gart, I'm going to start number 2 over, okay? It's not working.